If you're learning a language but are not yet fluent, or at least getting closer to it, here's every main reason for that and how you go about fixing them. So you can go from not getting the kinds of results you want to being well on your way to fluency. The first reason you're not making progress is that you believe people learn differently. We don't. The whole idea of learning styles is pretty much a complete myth, especially when it comes to language learning. Believing this could cost you hundreds of hours, hopping from one method to the other, thinking that there's some magical shortcut that only works for you. It may sound convincing when some guy's like, yeah man, like, you just gotta find your own thing, you know, like, just because it works for me doesn't mean it's gonna work for you. But if you're struggling to learn how to drive, you wouldn't think that steering with your feet is a solution, right? So, if something got someone fluent, it will get you fluent as well. Where individuality does matter, however, is in terms of personal preference. So, if you really enjoy doing one thing, but you dislike another thing, then obviously pick the thing you enjoy because you'll learn more from that. If you hate reading but love listening, pick listening, and vice versa. But the basics work for everyone. So you want to look at the people who've gotten fluent and copy the things that they're doing. Which takes us to point number 2. The second reason you're not making progress is that you're too focused on studying. No person who's ever gotten fluent have done that relying on textbooks and apps only. Yet, that's the first thing that most people go to when they want to learn a language. I swear to God that every time I speak to someone who wants to learn a language or are learning a language, they're always doing that either through an app or through school. And pretty much none of these people get past even the beginner stage. So if you're not making the kind of progress that you want in your language, look at your approach. Is it conducive to building actual intuition and an understanding of the language that goes beyond just random facts? Or is it just bombarding you with random words and grammar points without any context? It's generally agreed upon among linguists and high-level language learners that only doing so-called intentional study, that means specific grammar drills or vocabulary study, is just not enough on its own to get you fluent. They teach you some valuable things for sure, but they don't teach you how the language works as a whole. And that is the missing part in most people's routines, which is why they'll never reach fluency. So to ensure you don't just waste your time getting nowhere, you want a large chunk of your routine to be made up of what's called comprehensible input. This is interesting content like TV shows, movies, YouTube videos, books, podcasts, all at the right level. So long as you have this in your routine, you will get fluent with time. But only having this could mean that you're making progress pretty slowly, which takes us to the third reason. The next mistake is not doing any explicit study at all. Now, I don't think this is most people's reason for not progressing, but it does deserve a mention. If you spend 5 hours a day watching TV in the language, then of course you'll make rapid progress. And this is pretty much what I did with English. I spent many years spending close to like 8 to 12 hours a day just watching stuff and playing games in English. But if you have a life, then doing some separate study will speed this up for you. So what you can do to get to a basic level in the language pretty quickly and just build sort of a base is to look up some kind of a word frequency list with the most common words in that language, and then also learn the basics of grammar. You can do this by just AI generating it or looking up some video series or a random article. The most important thing here is that you don't just do this, but that you also don't just do input. If you have to pick one, then just do input, but even that's gonna be pretty slow. Now, the next reason that you're not progressing very quickly is that you're just not very specific with your learning. You could be doing a lot of things, and a lot of pretty good things, but they're just not the right things at this current moment. Many people say they spend time studying, but what they're actually doing is watching some random YouTube video on this word versus that word, or top 10 travel phrases or something like that. And it's not that it's bad to build up any kind of base of set phrases or theoretical knowledge of the language. It's just that ultimately that should make up maybe 5% of your studies maximum, not 95. So to get the highest ROI on your study, instead of just doing whatever you feel like, try to actually diagnose your weaknesses and find the right thing for you at this current moment. And if you struggle knowing what steps to take next and you want some personalized advice on your language learning, I offer one-on-one coaching, so click the first link in the description to see if I can help. But even if you do the right things at the right times, there's still one more thing that nobody but yourself could help you with, and without it, you get absolutely nowhere. So the fifth mistake is a lack of focus. Most learners can't decide on what language to learn, what method to use, what resource to use within that method, and they can't even stick to the 1 hour study slot that they've allotted to themselves. You can't count 1 hour of study as 1 hour of study if you sit down with a textbook and every time your phone goes off, you take a small break to check on Instagram or whatever. If this is how you study, then trust me, you won't get anywhere. You have to engage with the language when learning. You have to process it and actually be active. Find out what you have to do, and don't just switch resources all the time for the sake of it. Set an actual routine for yourself and stick to it. And when you're studying, try to actually focus. Don't just watch to get it over with, but engage with the language. This is a very common critique of immersion learning. People think that watching a Netflix show automatically just means zoning out completely and becoming a zombie. But that's not the case. And that takes us to the next mistake. Your input needs to be engaging and at the right level to make progress. A very common critique I hear about comprehensible input is how it's really unproductive to just sit down and watch something you understand pretty much nothing of. And that's true. But by definition, comprehensible input is something that is comprehensible, something you understand and can comprehend. So if I were to watch a long-form Japanese university lecture on macroeconomics or something, I'd pretty much understand nothing. But if it's a show about everyday life, then maybe it's more like 80, 90, 95%. So to make sure you progress as quickly as possible, you want to pick something difficult, but not too difficult. And there are a few ways of managing this. The first way is to just pick something easier, like videos specifically made for beginners on YouTube. This is personally pretty much the only thing I watched until I got closer to that intermediate stage and could start watching native media instead. And when you do make the step into native content, I think you want to start out watching mainly one or two kinds of genres that you enjoy and that also have visuals accompanying it. For me, this was fashion and food vlogs mainly. I remember learning the Japanese word for spinach by just watching this guy make pasta, which is obviously a lot easier since he shows every step of the process compared to if I was watching an interview with someone and they just said that they like spinach or something. But if that's still too difficult, there are a few ways that you can make it even easier. The first way is to just pause even more frequently and look words up and then add them to a program like Anki, like we discussed before. Because you're watching stuff mainly on the same kinds of topics, after a while you'll be acquiring quite a lot of knowledge about this specific topic, which will make, for example, cooking or fashion videos a lot more comprehensible for you compared to sports or some other topic. And then after a while, once you've learned a lot of specific words for that topic, then you can branch out into more general kinds of content. If you're watching a show or a movie, what you could do is to look up a summary of the plot online or even let ChatGPT generate it, which I think even works for YouTube videos if you have the transcript. This will spoil it a little bit, yeah, but you'll learn a lot more from it since you have a rough idea of what to expect in the video. And if you want to go the extra step, what you could do is to even just watch the whole show or one episode at a time or a movie or something like that in English first, and then go on to the language that you're learning. This will boost your understanding quite a lot since you already have an idea of what to expect when you're going to watch the movie again, for example. But it is also quite a lot slower, so that is why I tend to recommend YouTube over Netflix for most language learners. But ultimately, if there's, for example, an anime that you really want to watch, well, then that might help you be consistent. So really just pick whatever one that you like the most. And after you've done a lot of learning, another reason why you might not be making very much progress is that you're just not speaking enough. I put this point pretty late in the video because I don't think this is most people's problem. I mean, we're all pretty much told that we just gotta speak as much as possible to learn a language, but I think that's missing a pretty important piece of the puzzle. To actually learn a language, You have to learn and acquire new things, right? But when you're speaking a language, you're mainly just using stuff that you already know and have heard multiple times, right? And so that mainly does three things. It helps you practice making the sounds of the language. It helps you notice where your skill might be lacking a little bit and what areas you need to practice more on. And it also helps you activate knowledge and sort of recall things that you've already learned. This means that to get good, you need to first acquire a lot via studying, listening, or reading. And then, only after that, should you start speaking and trying to activate that knowledge. But not before. That's just a gigantic waste of time, pretty much. With that being said, speaking is definitely crucial to getting really good at a language. But it should be mainly used by intermediates and above who can already understand quite a lot of the things that they're hearing. So if you've been learning a language for a few years and you're kind of struggling to say things when you try to have a conversation, well, then it actually makes sense to spend more time speaking and less time studying. But your lack of results could also be for another reason, which is that you've simply not done enough. If someone told me they wanted to get fluent in a language and they're currently studying 10-20 hours a day, I'd probably tell them that at least need to triple that. A serious attempt at language learning is minimum close to an hour a day, every day. There are a lot of videos out there on my routine for studying 10 languages at once while being a parent and having a job and going to school full time and playing soccer on the side or something. And they often talk about stuff like, oh well, consistency is key. Like, so long as you do something every day, then you will get results with time and just don't give up. And it sounds kind of cute, right? But it's just not the reality, unfortunately. Like, think about it, bro. Like, how many hours did you spend learning your native language? Or English if that's your second language? Because I know that for me, it probably took 20,000 or 30,000 hours. And I'm not perfect yet. So yeah, for sure, you can get somewhere with 15 minutes a day. But over a year, that's less than 100 hours. So that's 200 to 300 times less than what I'll spend on English, for example. With that being said, just temper your expectations a little bit. Because while you can get somewhere in a few months, real fluency and real results takes years of consistent, hard effort. But if you can check off the boxes we've talked about today and you know the right steps to take, then you're well on your way there. But to actually stick to it, you should check out the video on screen right now where I talk about my honest advice that I wish I knew when I started learning languages. I'll see you guys there. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep learning.